Welcome to the GURPS Protocol, Season 2. Glad to be back. A lot of life events recently stopped me from working on these videos. So, we're kind of simplifying these episodes. We'll just get into the straight information a bit more this season. With that covered, let's talk about cinema rules. GURPS strives for realism. The rules are laid out to be down to realistic as possible. That's why it has such rules as turning radius, vision cones, and having 11 hit locations on the human body. If you want to do naked and afraid kind of campaign, then GURPS gives you every rule that you could ask for. But most people don't like doing that for long-term games. And that's why GURPS makes it clear to ignore or gloss over nitty-gritty realism and focus on more cinematic stuff. Page 488 of base set covers this best. The cinematic campaign is one where realism doesn't rule. Because of it, it would constantly get in the way of the story. In a cinematic campaign, swashbuckling heroes defeat dozens of foes because the story calls for it. Spacecraft whoosh or roar in the silence of space because fast things whoosh and powerful engines roar. Rightness always overrules mere correctness. Players want to enjoy their actions, to feel like things that we can't get in the real world. But GURPS isn't devoid of cinematic rules either. Traits like Serendipity, Gadgeteer, Gizmo, Weapon Master, Wild Talents are all great examples of cinematic-based traits. If you're interested, base set goes into greater general detail on how to run more cinematic games. But what about true cinematic control? What if you want to give the player the power of the actors in a movie playing out the scene? This is where cinema points come into play. For the first time in this series, we're going to venture out of the basic publication of books and venture into Pyramid Magazine. So, Steven Jackson Games produced a magazine subscription that ran for 10 years, and in this monthly subscription, they produce many alternative rules and concepts to your GURPS campaigns. While I don't know which of the magazine had it, we thankfully have a direct free link to the tools we're going to be talking about today. Cinematic points, or CP for short, is kind of a relative to bang skill. It also requires the exclamation mark to prove that it's cinematic. Cinematic points are gathered throughout the play of the game and as rewards for making the scenes better. Usually reward whenever a player does a critical or when a very unique event happens in the game. For example, let's say the hero was going to swing his sword and critically failed the roll. He could sit there and mope that he failed, or he could play up his failure into something unique that his sword flies out of his hand and pins itself to a wall far away. The player took what was an unfortunate event and turned it into an interesting story. This rewards them a cinematic point. This could also apply to successes as well. Say, a witty remark before killing an enemy. Coming up with a funny taunt or otherwise outplaying the situation is a great way to move the scene forward. So, what to use with these points? Well, cinematic points allow the player to alter the world around them to make the scene, or surviving them, better. Much like hero points in other systems, you could spend these to alter dice rolls from failures to successes. The difference every time you use a cinematic point, you need to go into detail describing the changes you make. Let's say a thief needs to break out of the shackles before the guard drags her away. She tries to roll for lockpicking, but fails. So she spends a cinematic point saying, as the guard footsteps got closer and closer, and the pin snapped, I quickly remember I had a spare pin in my hair, and before the guard could get there, I was gone. The tension was instantly raised so much higher in the story, Sure, you broke the rules of the game, but it created a more unique story for your players to remember. But cinematic points aren't just about changing results. There's also things like boomerang payback. Take that huge chunk of damage that you just received and send it back to the same amount to the cause. Or dramatic entry, exit, and pose. Lets you create dashing scenes where you don't know how to show up at the window with lightning behind them, but it strikes fear into the foes. And this is only a small fraction of the cool things you can use for it. Honestly, I recommend even if you don't play GURPS to give it a read. I have adapted this rule to things like Pathfinder because I just love it so much. I could go on and on about this one little rule set. It's by far one of my favorite things GURPS produced, and it's one of my favorite tools. But I think this will do it for now. Thank you so much for watching.